person, 3,000 people online. We have here a panel full of a very interesting subject for the financial market, funding profile for different cases of entrepreneurs in Brazil. And I would like to start quickly with Luiz Carvalho. He's the head of research in agribusiness in Brazil. We are anxious to have a debate now with you. Thank you. I hope you can hear me. First, it is a pleasure, Dr. Sheng, Guilherme, Letícia. It's very good to be here with you. I have a presentation. I think they should show it so we can follow this. I will talk a little bit about this new partnership between UBS and Banco do Brasil and talk about what we are doing. As Guilherme said, I am responsible for the research, LatAm research department, and I am a senior analyst for oil and gas and agribusiness. Talking a little bit about UBS BB, we usually say we are global. We have a mixture between a strictly global bank with presence in more than 40 countries, and this partnership now with Banco do Brasil, which is one of the largest commercial banks, as you know, largest commercial banks in Brazil, as you know. This partnership is focused on Brazil, but we have a presence in other countries in Latin America where we can have a good reach. Talking a little bit about the research department, which I lead in the region. We have more than 600 analysts scattered over 40 countries. These rankings in the last 4 years. In recent years, we're always on the top positions, and I was talking to Guilherme recently. This enables us to understand several industries because I have an analyst that is in India, in Asia, in Europe, and this complements our power of analysis. And then basically we have now a coverage of more than 3,000 stocks in more than 40 markets, which gives us a global reach. Talking about sustainable finance, we did some research recently with over 160 investors and executives who brought us some readings about the green bonds finance market, where there is a strong commitment on the part of investors to consuming this kind of product. As you can see in these graphs, I will not go into detail of each of the answers, but there is a certain difference between investors, debt investors, and equity investors in the corporate world, where in fact I would say there is a certain similarity between these answers, this demand, I would say, for green products. So most investors have a focus on this type of portfolio. We, as one of the largest private banks in the world, we know these clients, we know these new generations have a greater level of awareness regarding responsibility of this type of product. So there is very strong demand for these products. Talking a little bit about the flows that we have seen in recent years. So if we look at sustainable investing in the first quarter of this year, it reached something like as almost $2.5 trillion, coming from 1.3 trillion. So there was a great inflow into sustainable investments around the world. And I would say that this should be the trend looking forward in terms of potential growth that we can see looking ahead. In the first quarter of 2022, we saw investors allocating more than $70 billion to funds focused on sustainable investments. And I would say the climate funds are also, I would say, growing faster than others, but are still going down from a peak. And we are still on the second largest fund manager in the world of sustainable investing. Just to illustrate here and not to take too long, basically this is what we saw in terms of capital flow of capitals to the several products, so green bonds, the sustainable bonds, social bonds, let's say. So we see in a way or another in the last year, reflecting the end of the pandemic, there was a decline when we look year on year, but I would say it is still a quite high level of investment in this type of product, looking historically, I would say. And then just to close to end, Brazil is still focused. I was here talking to Dr. Sheng about this topic. There is a great evolution of these funds, or this interest and appetite of investors for this type of investment. So we see obviously growth. If we look in the last decade, we see a very substantial growth. And here this illustrates, let's say, how investors or how the flow, the equity assets under management are divided between these funds. I will stop here and turn the floor to Guilherme so we can answer questions and have some interaction here. Thank you again for inviting me. Thank you. It was a pleasure. I have a lot of ideas and questions here. Going straight, I would like to invite Guilherme Meira. We have participations in several events with DATAGRO and Proparco. It's a great partner for agro here in Brazil. I know several operations that you're doing. I think this update here at Global Business Forum is important for us to. It's very nice to be able to be here in this event. Thank you again for inviting me. I will go quickly over, talk about what Proparco does, and then I will talk about what Luiz said. I will talk about sustainable investing. I think you opened the door for this. Proparco is the arm of the French development agency that works with private players. The French agency works in a government-to-government basis, financing states and municipalities and state governments and public companies as a whole, and Proparco works with private players. In this logic, obviously, it is inserted within the context we are discussing here. There are transactions in Brazil and in the region financing sugar and ethanol, which is the sector where we have the biggest exposure. We also look at fruit production and orange production, and we look at coffee and pulp and paper. We've seen projects on animal protein and several things in the agro world, especially in what does not involve the production of transgenic products. Everything that is not transgenic, Proparco can look at, and we are interested in looking at. In this sense, we are obviously seeking products that have a bias of social and environmental and developmental impact. And in these lines, the agro world is one of the best, concentrates the three types of impact and very directly. So we are structuring an operation which is sustainability linked. It's not a bond, it's a loan. It is a product that's very interesting. You have a loan, a traditional loan, a bilateral loan between two institutions in which they monitor some type of indicator. It may be social, environmental, or both. And as you achieve social and environmental goals, you have a reduction in the margin of the operations of the loans. So just generates great alignment with the counterparty and makes the operation, in this case I'm talking directly about that, it makes a debt transaction, which is oftentimes is seen, oh, you just give the money and we come back to receive the interest and the money back. And when you create this sustainably linked mechanism, you align the interest of the parties, the company that is taking out the loan, that is even more interested, and then because of the financial bias, they are interested in reaching social and environmental targets. And there's also the interests of development banks and multilateral bodies, agencies connected to sustainability. For those who are following the event, you see that this is the hottest topic in agro, which is to try to understand the interests of the world, reduce impact and carbon footprint, and the operations that have green bonds bias, sustainability bonds and sustainability linked loans are operations that that match this demand very well. This topic is central to our strategy. Operations that contribute to the fight against climate change are the biggest focus of Proparco. And this is a key element of our strategy. I think the topic, thank you for your participation. I think the main topic that you addressed here in your contribution was the importance of agro and ESG. And here at DATAGRO, we totally agree with you. And I think the word that summarizes the position of agro as a whole, not only in Brazil, but as a whole, the ability to reinvent itself, resilience, agro, once again, is proving its importance and its strength in these moments of crisis we are going through. So that the sad crisis between Russia and Ukraine reinforces the position of companies that produce biofuels as important regions to supply structural things, which is the case of Brazil, the United States. India is beginning its renewable energy program. So I think it is one of the topics of ESG. We haven't talked a lot about S, but there is no sector with a greater capacity to transfer income and multiply human development indicators than the agribusiness. So when you have a new frontier and then you have a new plant, you make the restaurant appear, a person who sells services, so you create an ecosystem and develop the region. Because the service sector depends on the agro, and you sometimes don't see this. You just see GDP from services, but actually it's agro GDP. If we remove agro industry from the category of industry in Brazil, we don't have industry in Brazil. After I found out that meat packing plants are categorized as industry, so we are really an agricultural country, and God must be a farmer. Moving on to the next participation, we have the pleasure. Professor Sheng was my professor during my master's degree. It is a pleasure to have a black belt from the financial market here with us. And here he has a role that is very important, Vice President of the Bank of China. Professor, it is a pleasure to be here sharing this stage with you. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here once again. And thank you, colleagues. Luiz from Banco do Brasil and UBS, and Guilherme from Proparco, and Letícia from BSBIOS. Thank you, Guilherme. In my presentation, actually, just to recap, the first thing I would like to introduce the Bank of China in Brazil, which is a new bank. If you think from this point of operations, only 10, 12 years. And has been investing a lot, following our friends from international banks. My name is Sheng, Hsia Sheng. I'm the Vice President of the Bank of China in Brazil. Talking a little bit about the Bank of China, the bank is one of the largest Chinese banks within China as well. Just to give you an idea, we manage $4.3 trillion, and the profit last year at the end of the year was in 2021 was $38 billion. It is a lot. It is very well known globally in the ranking ranked among the top banks, recognized by the three top rating agencies. It's one of the best Chinese banks in the world. Well, here I put here a bit more our operations in Brazil. Here, last year we had the pleasure to be recognized in the ranking of Estadão Mais as one of the best wholesale banks in the country. As you know, little by little, Chinese banks have a different pace. I was explaining this to our colleagues. While you run 1,000, maybe we run 100, but we always doing gradually, participating too in the construction of Brazil, in the social and economic development, especially in the agro area and in other sectors as well. And the Bank of China now, thinking of the operation, it has more than 50 points in the world. It is the Chinese bank that is the most internationalized bank in China among the top 4 Chinese banks. And all in South America alone, we have another 6 points. We have in Argentina, Peru, and Chile. And in Mexico, and so on and so forth, Panama. And mentioning this, our focus is obviously the Bank of China has a very strong operation in Asia, in the main points in Asia and the main markets, and this has a coincidence. Many imports, Brazilian imports and then exports are in our points of operation according to our map. Now I would like to talk a little bit about our participation in sustainability, ESG.
Our bank has always played an active role in regards to sustainable development, social development, and economic development through its financial strengths. And how do we work? We work in 4 different pillars, as you already saw in my presentation. We have bilateral loans. So we try to play an active role in regards to investments and in regards to global investments that are linked to sustainable projects as well as bio investments. So we invest more than $20 billion overseas, and we partner with global banks around the world. So Bank of China plays an important role in regards to subscriptions and ESG, green bonds, and sustainable linked bonds. And these subscriptions take place in Asia. Because we are an Asian bank, of course, it makes sense. We have a stronger presence in Hong Kong and Shanghai. So the third pillar is to work with the Bank of China. Recently this year, we had the bank subsidiaries collecting millions and millions of dollars to sponsor the development of this project in Europe and China, all over the world with the companies. So last but not least, I've been attending some lectures, and I've learned so much with other speakers. Well, we know that sustainability and the assessment of a project, how can we assess a project in order to conclude that such product is sustainable enough? So do we look at carbon emissions? What are the criteria for that? So what is the criteria? So we have been participating actively in these discussions for international standards. And what does it, how do we classify a project as a sustainable project so that we can grant the loans for such projects, and the participation of such companies defining international standards. We have a very strong standard. We work along with in European agencies, and we follow international standards. So these are our 4 pillars, and Bank of China has been playing an active role in regards to these pillars. We've been making a lot of effort to collect collect awards all over the world. We've been a recognized bank, and according to Global Finance, we've been linked. The bank has won a award called Outstanding ESG, and four other awards. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, but Global Finance assesses not only globally, but it also it takes the continents into account, not only the headquarters, but also the subsidiaries, in order to grant these awards. It's been a great initiative. So we've won several awards with them. If you are a Bloomberg user, you will see that we are among the best Chinese banks according to the publications and according to Bloomberg. The Bank of China is, I would say, the biggest and most important banks in China. Is a bank that has participated in several associations and discussions. So this is what we've been doing. This is how we've been recognized as a bank. These are our global initiatives in regards to sustainability and climate change, and also finance. Well, as I have already mentioned, we played an active role here in Brazil with Petrobras of 1.25 billion, and we made efforts with the U.S. along with the U.S. Thank you so much. 1.35 billion US dollars. So thank you very much, and I will hand it over to you. Mr. Sheng, it's a pleasure to be here with you in this discussion panel. I have some Q&A here, some questions. And do you think that there can be opportunities in Asia, Brazil, and so on? We will talk about that, but Letícia is going to be delivering her presentation afterwards. I'd like to hand it over to Letícia, our last panelist. She's not speaking on behalf of a financial institution. Actually, she represents a brand and a brand position that is very thinks outside of the box. So I've heard you guys are working on jet fuels and so on. So I know you are very engaged and committed to the ESG agenda as well. We are a very young company, and our core business. All right, I'm going to start over again. I'm sorry, my microphone was not working. Well, I'm going to be introducing the company BSBIOS. It's a very young company. We have been in the market for not for too long, but we have three main pillars: purpose, vision, and values. As our purpose, we want to participate in the sustainable development of the planet. Our vision is to be among the three largest biofuel producers in the world by 2030. And our values are sustainability, integrity, innovation, commitment, and value generation. We want to generate value. So in regards to BSBIOS, we are one of the biggest biodiesel plants in Brazil. We have two plants in Passo Fundo. And then we produce there 936 million liters of biodiesel per year. We create more than 500 direct job positions. We work with soy oil, and we process daily around 340 tons of soybeans there. We closed the year with revenues of more than 9 billion BRLs. We partnered in Switzerland. We started a project in Switzerland, and we have a plant that produces 5.6 million liters of biodiesel per year in Switzerland, and the raw material there is the renewable cooking oil. So this is our latest project. We've been working on this project for the last 3 years, and Guy has already mentioned here is a biodiesel, advanced biofuel, and this biofuel is going to be produced for jets. We are going to produce more than 2,000 barrels daily there. We are going to work with animal origin animal and renewed cooking oil. We are expecting to have revenues over $1 billion, and we want to reach that by 2025. And we will be working with jet fuel, green naphtha. In regards to our core values and our sustainability values, we have a very strong seal. We want to be carbon free by 2030 and carbon neutral by 2030. We expect to in the next upcoming years, we expect to be very committed to the ESG practices. And at the beginning of this year, we published our manifesto. If you want to read our manifesto, you are more than welcome to do so. You will understand our development plan and our supply chain. So these are some of the certificates that we have in regards to ESG, ISCC. So we can export biodiesel to Europe. And we also have we've concluded that the social was being forgotten and was being left behind. So we started focusing on social programs, and we've partnered with some associations to foster social projects and programs, so Brascaola, some international associations, such as Advanced Biofuels in the United States, and so on. So obviously, we have a problem, and this forum, we've been tackling these issues, and we've been talking about global warming and climate change. So I think we've been very motivated through investments and countries that believe us, but we do believe that we will need more investors, of course, and the investments should be should keep happening. We need investments for the country to grow. Here are some of the initiatives, and I call them "It's Now or Never" initiatives because we don't have much time as far as humanity is concerned. We want to expand our ethanol production by 2024, the biodiesel and biojet HBO, the hydrogen, which is a molecule that has made a huge difference and has a huge potential. We want to have people in the center of everything. So it's a global movement. It's of course it's a local investment, but it's a global movement. So in order to achieve all our goals, we must focus on all these points. So in regards to our recent mission, we partnered with Santander. We got this loan, this green loan from Santander Bank, and the adherence to the financial market was pretty good. We issued a loan. We granted a loan for cooking oil. We partnered with a local association called Acloama. They are managed by locals, people who live in that city. So we've been collecting great KPIs. We've been benefiting from it, and also with great interest rates. I hope that this is the first of many initiatives that we have. We need to generate, to catch up. We need to catch up. We need more investments in this area, and we need to prioritize companies that follow the ESG practices. Not only follow, but we want to prioritize these companies. So this is what we want to do as far as a company is concerned. So my final message is we have appetite. We are hungry for investments. We want to foster investments, and we know that it needs to be increased, of course. We have to keep on running, and we need to run fast so that we can meet the demands that we have right now. Here are two graphics, two illustrations that illustrate the green volumes. On the right side, you have the forecast for the annual trillion in green bonds possible by 2023. There is a huge potential. There's a huge growth potential, by the way. And because there is a lot of potential, we have opportunities to grow. So I do believe that this is the best way we will be able to mitigate these problems, the environmental issues, by generating investments and taking care of the environment. Thank you very much, guys.
Letícia, thank you very much for your participation. I think it was very rich, and I agree that the capital market has a responsibility first to increase their operations and adapt the profile of the funding offers to the companies. We need to have the right funding at the right time to plan, to sow, and treat the crops. This is one of the benefits of the capital market, and the other is a dentist, a doctor, or a service provider who invests in funds that support initiatives like that will provide guidance so that the companies can continue to have responsible operations. We will begin a debate here, and I will begin with Letícia. And I would like to ask you a question. I think you were very fortunate when you gave an example of how the company is benefiting from responsible policies. This is in high vogue. This is in vogue. ESG. Do you think in this first operation was more E or more S? Was it the oil or the person who collected the oil who had the greatest value? It seems to be rhetorical, but it was 50-50. But this KPI that we are seeking, we will only be able to reach because we have this partnership with this association, generating new collection points. It is moving forward in total synergy. This only happened because there is this association. Of course, the company wants it, and the third part wants that, the bank with this appetite to have this volume. And this, is it a capital market operation, a CRI, or is it a conventional debt? Conventional debt. Moving on to Luiz, I have a question for you. How do I, as a Brazilian investor who accesses the basis through UBS, can differentiate the different products that are available on the shelf through monitoring, operational rating? How do I compare the products that are being distributed through the bank basis and the market? Excellent question. Nowadays, there are some external certification institutions that compare these products. There is obviously a level of, I would say, of internal compliance. I can talk about UBS BB regarding the monitoring of the performance of the companies, as Letícia mentioned. There is a discussion of how much the company is able to meet the targets that it set during the debt or the target. And Bloomberg, on the platforms, there are some ways to compare. And I think it has to do more with the financial performance, the return, which is obviously linked to the risk of a given operation or a given company. But there are mechanisms now, independent mechanisms that you can use to monitor not only on the financial side of the product, but also monitor the operating metrics, environmental, sustainability, or governance targets of the company. So there is a point in your question that says we are increasingly seeing, maybe at the beginning, this ESG was a lot in E, but there is a big concern with the environmental aspect. But we see investors are demanding that the three letters are very well connected. You need to have environmental, but also social benefits, and if the governance of a certain sector does not follow all environmental progress. There are some mechanisms to monitor the two sides of these vehicles. Thank you, Luiz. Professor, DATAGRO has clients in more than 50 countries. I am in a phase here, I've done some distant countries, and I've been traveling frequently to Africa and Southeast Asia. This year, I've just come back from my 7th trip. This is the year in which I traveled abroad more times. Clearly, China and its investments in Africa are very relevant in many sectors, in communications, infrastructure, distribution. And we are beginning to see this here in the Americas. And here we are in the Global Agribusiness Forum in Brazil, and you are responsible for the region in Brazil. Give us your opinion on what you think is strategic for the Bank of China to invest here. Is agro on the list? What is the profile of agro operations that you're looking at? So we can understand the opportunities. Imagine that here in our audience there are many farmers here who are looking at you as like a pot of gold, although there are several $trillion. Thank you, Guilherme, and for the compliment to the bank. I think just like all other banks, the operation of the Bank of China in Brazil has a lot more to do with cooperation with Brazilian banks. So I think this has to be clear. The Bank of China is not here to work alone, and it is here to work with all Brazilian major banks and international banks. Now, uh, uh, regarding your question, the Bank of China has really, it prioritizes funds to ESG area and climate change and sustainability. And this is a priority for the bank. The bank, as we have seen, it is little by little being recognized not only globally, but it is now has now started to be recognized in Brazil and Latin America as one of the partner banks together with other banks, Western banks and Eastern banks too, and the Brazilian banks to be a solution for large Brazilian companies in the agro area and in the agro-industrial area and also in other industries related to sustainability and the green issues. It's not only in agro, but any other industry that is committed to reducing carbon levels and try to reach sustainability goals. Just to be clear for me and for those who are watching us, I am a small, medium, or large farmer, and I want to create a relationship with you. Should I go see a Brazilian bank that would lead me to you, or do I see you directly? Actually, the Bank of China in Brazil is still small. We have around 60 employees. Our operation is still limited. For this reason, we currently can only serve well major Brazilian companies and large multinational companies that operate in Brazil. Little by little, we will want to serve with the expansion of the bank. We would like to serve other segments, but in the case of your question, I think it is a very good solution that we are looking very fondly at in Brazilian banks are the large cooperatives. And large cooperatives in Brazil have a social function, an economic function that is fantastic and helps small and medium farm holders, not only funding, but the entire but manages risks. So I think large cooperatives would also, it would be very nice to enter into partnerships with small and medium Brazilian companies. Thank you very much. Proparco, what is the profile of the operations? Duration, term? How long does it take to access the French funding? Our operations to have a minimum ticket of $15 million, and we have bigger tickets. We wouldn't be able, just like the people from the Bank of China, we wouldn't have our capacity to operate with very small producers. We have more than 10 operations with banks in Brazil, creating specific lines that tend to be to have funds directed to smaller players. And bilateral transactions, our minimum ticket is around $15 million. In terms of terms, the minimum term here to start generating a relevant impact is 5 years. This is the minimum term. We have operations of 12 years in agro, which is not very common for bilateral operations. We had 15-year operations with infrastructure companies. So we managed to have very long durations. It depends on each product, each demand, each client. So we think 5, 8, 10 years. It is in line with what we like to do. They are amortizing. They're not bullet operations. They have like 5, 6 years. It's very reasonable. Let me get the hook. I do not represent the Banco do Brasil specifically, but Banco do Brasil is a large bank for agribusiness here that reaches this part of small farm holders with different financing products. And the French agency is working with Banco do Brasil. I don't know all the details because it's another vehicle, but it is the bank that can reach those people. Yes, certainly, but I think the capital market can enable access to operations with development banks like Proparco and other banks that we have observed. I have noticed interest in which the development bank is increasingly open to see if its funding that is more long-term can access different links of the chain. Definitely, and our role, just like that of my colleague from the bench of China, it's not to compete with local banks. I think local banks do their role, fulfill their role very well. They offer trade-related debt that is very well structured. The farmers know what to do, how fast they can get the money. So it's really good and it works really well. And the role of Proparco is not to compete with local banks in this type of line. We come here to complement the offering of credit in the local market, that the first solution and most obvious solution is local commercial banks, and then this is another line that DATAGRO has a lot of experience, like CRAs, structured products, and Proparco will operate in a niche, financing capex and long-term products focused on capex with long-term debt, with farmers who export, who need structured debt in dollars and in euros. That would make a lot more sense for them without having to resort to the swap market, so we would be more competitive. I think there's not only space for everyone, but each player will help the market in a different way. So obviously Leticia's company will look at different solutions. It will not have a one-stop shop solution that will solve all the problems. And in this point, I think it will work with local banks and development agencies and multilateral organisms, and you will be able to cover a different demand of the counterparty. But I think one of the things that each entity brings, and I think that is something that is in vogue, multilateral entity like Proparco will have stronger ESG and monitoring biases that are stronger, and it will promote the ESG agenda. 20 years ago, governance was a lot worse than it was today, and now we see governance as something that is primordial, and it's our responsibility to guide the way in structural agencies that are long-term. If you look at governance now, and it is a key element, a must-have for operations. I used to say ESG was a differential, and now this is the basic. If you look at environmental now, we are at a point in which you can access so many pockets more if you have a stronger social and environment bias, that this is almost a mandatory demand on the part of the players, and we will follow this. Another thing I would like to ask your operation, where there is the enforcement that you have a responsible stock and commercial benefits. Do you think this is a trend, or is it something that is there any other? There was another development bank that developed a line in this sense, which is Brazilian Development Bank. It created the Renova Bio, which is a program for people who are not very, it's for biofuels in Brazil, biodiesel, biogas, and ethanol. So my question for you is, Are there options for you to show and to have the benefits of the work you're doing?
I believe so. I believe this is a trend, and us as a company, we've been trying to address this agenda locally as well because we work with different types of credits. We want to increase the participation of green volume, green loans, green bonds. So we've been trying to make it more relevant, of course. You participate in this program, right? The BNDES program called RenovaBio. Do you do you also participate in other carbon programs around the world? Is it a trend? Yeah, we do. We participate in RenovaBio. We are certified. Both plants are certified, and we have this movement that we have in the company because it's important to have certificates. We export our products to Europe, and we worry about the final cost and the final prices of our products. We participate in this program that was inspired by programs in the United States. So we do focus on on the final product as well. So I have a question for you guys. I can see that banks are hungry and they are really focusing on ESG practices, but what have you been doing in order to improve your KPIs and your governance? What have you been doing in practical terms so that you can be more agile and also can create more benefits? Wow, what a hot topic. Uh, in fact, uh, there's always two sides of the coin, right? Yes, exactly. What I think is banks in general, as opposed to capital market, banks, they work with some government banks like Bank of China, Banco do Brasil. When we look at sustainable financial finances, we must look in the long term, right? But we are able to customize, to be pioneers, and to be innovative. The capital market follows a more standardized model. We don't. We can be more adaptable and we can adapt more and have more concessions. Anyway, this is the main difference in regards to time. Because we are innovating and adapting our products to companies in general, like Petrobras, for instance, we need a little bit more time to to have a roadmap and study what's happening. There is bigger volume. The deadline is a little longer. So, how can you contribute as a company? How can you contribute? And how do you do your cash flow? Do you worry about the impact that your company has in the environment or not? So for these banks, this is very important. So and that's why it takes longer for banks like this to grant loans. We cannot only think about capital markets. Like, yeah, capital markets, they will issue something and they will grant something, but the government banks, they need to think better. They need to think over. They need to work with being pioneers and leaders. Just take Bank of China as an example. Bank of China issued one of the most important bonds called biodiversity bonds, and this is an important point. So we cannot lag behind, I believe. Yes, that's right. Proparco participated in some huge operations for wind mills, and at the time they saw They saw that as something exotic, something out of the box. But nowadays, the market is more familiar with alternative energy, and I think it takes time. Of course, you need to get access to to someone who is certified, so that they can see if you meet the demands and the requirements. Sometimes it takes a decade to build a relationship with a partner, a business partner. So when you look at a specific project, you can do that. You can monitor the impact of that project. But it's important to bear in mind that it's a long-term relationship. It's very different from capital market. All right, I know that we are running a little bit out of time, but I just want to say one more thing. If the project is good, there will be funding for that. Okay, bear that in mind. And I start noticing, as Guilherme has mentioned here, I started noticing that banks are using a different kind of criteria to invest in these projects. They are very aware of ESG practices, and they want companies to meet the ESG requirements. So there is supervision, right? So you guys supervise these companies. Yes, guys, I think we all agree with this point, and especially people who are watching us. We are facing a time in history in which the financial market has a huge responsibility, because we need to face structural reforms. So where and how are we going to allocate our resources? This is going to play a crucial role in the future, and it's going to tell us where to go. We need to look at prices, assessment. Letícia, I've been keeping up as an advisor and as a financial advisor. I've been keeping up with everything that has been going on in the market, and it's great to hear your opinions. It's a trend, and they will be forced to have different prices. So Banco do Brasil, Bank of China, they will have to have mechanisms in order to make efforts. We are facing a very important time in Brazilian society, and I will illustrate that. The fourth biggest city has 4 million cars, and we've been polluting more than 1,400 in the ranking. In Bali has 5 million cars and is among the top 20. We are a green country. We don't use masks. We don't wear masks in São Paulo, and because of biofuels. And in the last 2 terms, we created public policies that were quite important. I'll give you a few examples. RenovaBio going from B6 to B15, increasing our capacity for biodiesel production. So we had this dilemma. We had the product, but we didn't have the client. Now we have the client, so now we have the customer. So Floresta Mais represents this change. We need to preserve forests, and by preserving forests, we are going to generate wealth for producers, for farmers. 80% of your area needs to be a forest reservation. We need to deal with wildfires and so on. So I think I see a lot of opportunities in the future. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and to participate in this event. I'd like to thank all of you, and a round of applause. Thank you so much, Professor Sheng, Gui, Luiz, and Letícia. Thank you so much.